layup. W's as easy as a layup. Working late, stay up, stay up. Counting all the way up. Counting blessings, yeah, you know we pray up. Way up, pray up. On track, now we going way up. Going way up. Now we going way up. Now we going on track, now we going way up. Going way up. Now we going way up. Now we going. Keep that same energy. Work on being better when I'm 70.
Well, I was muted. Let's try that again. Welcome, everybody, to The Edge, showcasing the latest in logistics technology. I'm Trey Griggs, founder and CEO of Beta Consulting Group. Excited to have you here with us on another one of our shows on the Beta Podcast Network, The Edge. We're going to have a great show today. We've got a lot of good things to talk about. It's going to be a lot of fun. And make sure you join us every month on the first Wednesday, typically of the month, for an episode of The Edge. We'll talk about more about our upcoming shows here in just a little bit. Before we get started today, a little bit in tech news. I'd like to talk about what's going on out there. I don't know if you guys have heard this or not, but my good friend Tom Curie, formerly of Kingsgate Logistics, is starting a new logistics tech company called QUED, Q-U-E-D. And he's focusing on centralizing the appointment scheduling at pickup and drop-off locations, and more to come about that. If you're following Tom or if you're seeing what's going on, keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. He announced this at TIA Capital Ideas Conference Exhibition in Orlando, Florida, just a couple of weeks ago. So, Tom, we're pulling for you, man. Hope that it goes really well. Can't wait to see what you create in the industry. I have a feeling it's going to be absolutely great. A couple of other things that are going on in the industry in regards to technology. Of course, we have the update with DAT and Convoy, where a judge dismissed or basically ruled in Convoy's favor against dismissing the lawsuit they brought against DAT. A lot of things going on there. Our good friend Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney, he breaks that down all the time. So make sure you follow his show and his content on LinkedIn, and he will help you with what's going on with that. A lot of stuff I don't understand, but I'm following along to see how that all plays out. The ex-Slink CEO, Chris Kirchner, was indicted in federal courts. That was a big topic recently. You can check that out as well. See what all is going down in that case. A lot of this comes from the Journal of Commerce and Eric Johnson. So for the latest in all logistics technology, I'd encourage you to follow Eric Johnson of the Journal of Commerce. Project 44 and Hapag-Lloyd linked up to provide visibility of individual containers, continuing their push towards complete visibility, global visibility of the supply chain. And finally, Flexport acquired Shopify Logistics to get into fulfillment and final mile delivery, which was one of their stated goals this year. Earlier, CEO Dave Clark mentioned that in a call back in February, I believe. And so they acquired Shopify Logistics, moving into that direction of final mile and fulfillment. So we'll see how that all plays out with the tech that they've got going on. And again, for the latest in logistics technology, be sure to follow Eric Johnson on LinkedIn. He's with the Journal of Commerce. Great content, great articles, and just a really solid mind. He was on my show Standing Out recently, and it was a really great episode. We had a good time with that. A couple of announcements real quick. Wanted to let you guys know we had the Word on the Street Tough Mudder Charity Challenge 2 weeks ago. We raised over $12,000 for ALS patients. We had a tremendous support of corporate sponsors and donors. Our goal was 10,000. We hit 12,000. We're so excited about that. And thank you to everybody who did donate to that cause. All the money goes to ALS patients here in St. Louis who are dealing with end-of-life services. So we appreciate that. Also, we got a couple of shows coming up here. We got our Word on the Street special episode this Friday with Emily Lavaseur about logistics consulting. And we got a new sponsor announcement. That's on noon on Friday. And so make sure you join us for that as well. Okay. All right. We're going to get right to our guest today. My guest is doing some really cool stuff in regards to data, specifically around weather. And so we're going to get a chance to talk to him today about what's happening over at Weather Optics. Everybody, please give it up for my good friend, Scott Pecoriello, with the vibe music.
Good. It's good. Hey, Trey.
I love this. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to talk about this. I mean, I don't think I've ever been more excited to talk about weather than I am today. I mean, this is kind of your awesome baby, your puppy, but this is your thing. Jeff, what's up, man? Good to see you on the show today, my friend. Thanks for joining. Appreciate that. All right, so Scott, we had a chance to we got connected by somebody in the industry. I think made an introduction for us, but I got to see you at TIA, actually meet you in person for the first time, and talk a little bit about what you're doing at Weather Optics. But let's just jump in for a little bit. First of all, what's your story? How did you get into weather, and how did you get into logistics tech? Give us a little background of how this happened.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. My background is in the weather. I grew up as a huge weather nerd. So for my entire life,
were you a storm chaser? Were you that kind of a weather nerd?
Before. Yeah. When I was younger, storm chasing. Yeah.
What did you chase? Tornadoes?
I
Probably.
chased a tornado in Connecticut, believe it or not, actually a couple of
Really?
years ago.
Connecticut?
Yeah, there was a tropical storm hit the coast, and I raced down in my car, and I caught it on camera before it came on shore. So my background has always been weather. I'm a huge weather nut, and actually had a blog when I was growing up in middle school, high school, college, that became really popular, and so we attracted a lot of attention. We were basically forecasting how weather was going to impact different business operations. And that sort of snowballed into more of an enterprise-facing company. We were actually reached out to by a meal kit delivery company on Twitter, asking if we could build them something that was sort of SaaS-based, and that was a risk score that they could use. So that really started everything. And now we're a full weather intelligence platform. We work with a ton of companies in the supply chain and logistics space. And we're trying to change how logistics companies work and think about the weather.
Yeah, and well, I'm a big fan of electrical storms. That's probably my favorite. Living here in Missouri and St. Louis, we get quite a few electrical storms, and
I'm
those
sure.
are always my favorite. As long as there's no hail and no tornado involved in that, it's pretty enjoyable. So weather and logistics. Obviously, if you've been in transportation for any amount of time, you know that weather can have a major impact on transportation. But the crazy thing about it for me is most weather is predictable, and yet I don't feel like we actually use that data very well. How did you get started with weather optics? Was that a part of it? Talk about the weather optics journey and what really led you to say, let's start working with this data.
Yeah, so we found that opportunity sort of with this meal kit delivery company, right? We had this idea of what if we translated weather data into insights that were a lot easier for logistics companies to understand. And so we created all of these risk scores, and we created this routing product. That way, a trucking company or a 3PL or anyone in the space could really grasp how weather was going to impact their operations. I think a lot of the disconnect is that what do you do with weather data, right? Like if you know it's going to rain or snow or there's going to be wind, how delayed is your shipment going to be? How much danger is your driver in? What's the impact on the spot market and spot pricing? So everything we do now is just translating weather data into insights that are actionable that other companies can use.
So you referenced risk score. What exactly does that mean, a risk score, and how is that calculated?
Yep. So we take all of this different data. We take weather data, both historical and predictive, and then we take a lot of non-weather data. So vehicle data, power outage data, topography data, and we basically create these models that understand how weather is going to impact different business operations. So we have all of these simple 0 to 10 risk scores that basically tell you the likelihood of impact to roads or to power or business disruption, things like that.
Okay, all right. And then who is the primary beneficiary of that data? Is this mainly for trucking companies? Is it for freight brokers? Is it for shippers? Is it for everybody? Like, talk a little bit about the kind of the target audience of how that data is utilized.
Yep, all of those industries can really get value out of the data that we're providing. I think we started more on the retail shipper side because of that meal kit delivery company. But then we realized that there were all these, carriers and supply chain technology companies who really are affected by delays and by spot rate changes. So our insights can be used by pretty much anyone in any space in the logistics industry.
Nice. And then Clark, he lives here in St. Louis with me. He actually wants hail because he needs a new roof. Clark, listen, good luck with that. I don't really want to deal with that, but you can have fun with that if you like to. So carriers are using this, brokers are using this, and that's awesome. Well, before we dig into it a little bit more, I want to pause and just a little bit talk about your personal. What's your favorite weather event?
Oh, that's such a tough question.
You've had to have been asked this question.
No, I know. And I think I change my answer every time, but I really think it is the snow. I think that's when I'm the happiest, is when it's snowing outside. So any kind of snowstorm, blizzard. I live in the New York City area, so this winter sucked, but we've had some big ones in the past, and I think those are the best.
It's going to be spoken like a true Northeastern, getting a good snowstorm, a good little blizzard in there is always nice to have. I'm kind of the same way. If it's going to be cold, it should snow.
Exactly.
I think.
Cold and dry, there's nothing worse than that. That's a waste of.
It is. So let me tell you my thing I hate most about weather living in the Midwest. So in the Midwest, you get these winter days where the skies are blue and the sun is out and it looks beautiful. And then you open your front door and that 20-degree weather just slaps you in the face. And that just pisses me off.
It's a tease,
yeah. It is.
And
it's a terrible
wind chill in there too. I mean, it's not a fun time.
Exactly. But if snow's out there, at least I know it's coming. It feels right. It feels better.
Right.
That's for sure. All right. So let me ask this question. When you think about the logistics space and weather, what problem are you really solving? Like, where does this lead to that, the problem that you're solving when you're on a sales call with somebody? How do you talk about that?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is safety, right? And it really, I mean, with trucking companies especially, right? But if we can warn a driver in real time and then ahead of time, maybe several hours out or a couple days out, that there's going to be some kind of issue on a route or a roadway, and then they can reroute or take a different action. That's where our biggest value comes into play for the trucking industry. And then when it comes to retailers, it's more about figuring out delay times, making sure that your routing schedules and your departure schedules are avoiding high impact weather events. And then for 3PLs, it's really about communication, customer satisfaction, making sure that if you're trying to move a load during a high impact weather event, you really understand what's ahead and how you should price that, or if you should even accept the bid at all, right? So different value props for different industries, but what's great is that our products are sort of the same, right? So you can be using them in a multitude of sort of different ways.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the logistics of weather optics for a moment. So you kind of need to know the route that a driver is going to be taking. Like, so for example, if I'm going from St. Louis to Portland, Oregon, for example, at some point I'm going to be on I-80 and then I-90, and there's going to be certain ways that I'm going to go, especially if you kind of have that route planned out. Are you able to send warnings based upon that? Or how do you get these warnings, these actionable insights to drivers, to companies based upon where they're headed? Like, how does that all work together?
Yep, we have a couple of different ways, and actually, it's probably just easiest to show you if I could just share my screen here and I can show you what we're talking about. So this is our insight portal. It basically takes all of our APIs, all of our data, and it makes it really nice and pretty for our customers to digest and to use. And so what you're looking at here is our dashboard built for exception management. So a company can come in here and basically upload all of their shipments for the week out to 7 days. And then we analyze each of those shipments for weather impact. So you'll see an origin, a destination, a departure time. That's all the information that we need. We partner with the routing providers to understand what route your truck is likely to take. And then we tell you things like how impacted that route is expected to be, how delayed we think that route or that shipment's going to be, the adjusted ETA time based off of weather and traffic. And then we pull in those road risk scores that I was talking about earlier. So 0 to 10, how dangerous are these conditions for the drivers? And then what's the actual weather that's happening? And so this makes it really easy for like a dispatcher or someone on the back end to take a look at their loads for the week and say, hey, we're expecting this kind of impact, and these are the changes that we should make to departure times, or, this is how we should be alerting the driver. And furthermore, you'll notice a couple of these have these, yellow flags here. We have a route optimization feature. So we'll actually let you know if we found a different route alternative that might have lower weather risk or a faster ETA time. So that's really great for, again, the dispatcher or the transportation manager to use to avoid those kind of high impact weather events.
Yeah, you just answered the question I was going to ask, is like, does this just force drivers to stop what they're doing, or are there alternatives? And it sounds like if there's a better route that would be safer, maybe faster, they can keep moving, but they get the adjustment on the route based on the weather. Because it's amazing to me how weather is somewhat unpredictable. Like a tornado can shift and you don't really know, but at the same time, generally speaking, it's pretty predictable. What areas it's going to hit.
And the bigger events, right? The bigger events are, I don't want to say they're easier to predict, but when you have a localized event like a tornado or something, those are very difficult to predict exactly where
they're wild cards.
Tornado's going to cross a road. But when it comes to some of the bigger events, our accuracy is pretty good, and so we can tell you 3, 4, 5 days in advance what shipments or what loads are going to be impacted by weather and how delayed they're going to be, or what the actual danger is to the driver. And this is the planning feature of the tool, right? So if you're trying to plan out to 7 days, this is what you use. But then we also have this active vehicles feature, which is great. So we partner with all of the ELD providers. So if you're using, a Geotab or a Samsara or a Platform Science, you can connect your ELD with Weather Optics, and then we'll tell you in real time what conditions that driver is facing. So, is there a National Weather Service alert or warning? Is there wind? Is there road danger? Any of that information. And then we actually have our own insights for helping your driver to avoid an accident. So reducing speed or pulling over or taking a route alternative. And then if you want, you can send basically a direct message to that driver, reduce speed, high gusts, or, reduce speed to 40 miles per hour, right? You can make it whatever you want. send that and it'll go right to their ELD device so that they can see it and they can be aware of a weather situation that's going on.
Wow, I love that feature. And I assume the data that you're acquiring, is it all from the National Weather Service, or where do you compile all of this weather data in order to put it into one spot for something like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at the end of the day, we're a weather company, right? So we're actually taking like the computer forecasting models, we're blending them together, we're optimizing them for performance, and then we're using sort of this blended system to predict the weather, both real time and out to 7 days. So there's a lot of R&D, there's a lot of data science that goes into just the beginning of things, which is like, what is the weather going to be? And then there's even more R&D that goes into, okay, how is that weather going to impact a truck or a route or any kind of business operation?
Yeah. Now, all this is good data, but if a company just doesn't pay attention to it, it doesn't really help out. Is there any automated features in here where if a truck's driving down the road at 11 o'clock at night and there's nobody sitting, at the dashboard, that they could be notified, hey, there's some weather coming up, pull over for the rest of the night, go ahead and stop for the day, take this alternative route, slow your speed, those types of things. Like, how does that work? Because I mean, trucking's 24/7. People are out there driving all throughout the night. How does that work as opposed to the alerts?
That's a great question. All of this can be automated, right? So a company can actually come in and set thresholds for what they want to be alerted for. Maybe, if it's raining heavy or if the road danger index that we have is above a 7, they want their driver to be alerted. So anything that you see here can really be automated and then pushed out to a driver. I mean, imagine this is great for like, maybe you have a fleet of 100 or 150, it's manageable. But once you have 1,000 trucks or 5,000 trucks, that automation that you're talking about is key. And so we have that option as well.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear because, like, I mean, I can't imagine that somebody would have to sit here all day and send out these alerts all the time, but they can do it if they want. But if they set it up from the very beginning with these thresholds that you talked about, then they can automate those responses to go out to their drivers.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I love that. There's just a lot of really cool features here. Before you show anything else, though, I got to ask some questions about this. So, what weather events really impact drivers? Obviously, in the winter, you have snow, you have ice, and you threw the wind out there. What are the main events that really cause a lot of problems? And maybe talk about it seasonally if you have that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the belief is that snow and winter events, right, are the most disruptive, and that's true sometimes. But I think really what tricks trucking companies, and actually there's good data on this, is rain events and slick road conditions. So almost 50% of trucking accidents happen during rain and slick roads. So if that's a thunderstorm or some kind of rain event, and I think it really catches drivers off guard because they're not thinking about rain being a huge accident factor necessarily. And so those types of events are actually the trickiest for truck drivers. And then wind is also really tricky. So, if wind is above 40, 50, 60 miles per hour, it can lead to a vehicle rollover or a vehicle tipping. And we actually developed an index, because we're all about risk scores and indices, that predicts the likelihood of your truck tipping over due to high winds. So any truck driving or planning to drive, out to 7 days, we can tell you what the chances are that truck is going to have an issue with a rollover.
Interesting. And does the weight of the truck, I mean, obviously it would matter a little bit. If it's heavier, it'd probably last a lot longer in the wind, but do you just kind of assume an average, or do you actually use the data from a shipment that says what the weight of that shipment is?
Yep. So we can take in a ton of information. So vehicle weight, length, height, other attributes to the vehicle, as well as vehicle speed and direction, right? All of those have an impact on the likelihood of a truck.
So that goes into the algorithm. If you have the data, it'll actually go in there and say, hey, this shipment's only 15,000 pounds, so the truck's not nearly as heavy. This 40-mile-an-hour wind is going to have a greater effect than it would on a truck that's carrying 40,000 pounds down the road.
Yep. And we always like to say, like, the more information you give us, the more accurate our risk scores and our data.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, exactly.
But that's a great example, right? You can give us that information and we'll have a more accurate forecast for how that truck's going to be.
What about, because I was thinking about this as you were talking about it, what about maintenance issues on trucks? So for example, if I'm driving on the road and I'm towards the end of the life cycle of the tires that I'm on, that's going to impact my ability to drive in rain, as opposed to maybe somebody has brand new tires on their truck. Do you guys factor that in, or is that more of a, case by case, the driver kind of just needs to know that their tires are getting low, for example?
Yeah, it's a great question. That definitely plays a role, I would imagine, right? Like if a tire is older and not fit for the type of traction that they need during a weather event, that's going to have an issue. But we don't have anything right now that I guess accounts for that kind of data. Although that's honestly a pretty interesting idea. That would be, an interesting index that we could have, or another parameter that you could perhaps pass, through our data.
Well, I could see where like if a truck tire was on at 20,000 miles, for example, of their life of their tire versus one that's on its first 1,000 miles, or maybe one that's on 60,000. I don't even know the life cycle of a tire of a truck. I wish I knew, but maybe somebody does, right? But yeah. I'm sure there's something out there where if you knew that might say, hey, your tires are going to be a little bit more slick than normal. You'd be really careful in this rain, even if it's a light rain, it might actually have an impact. Totally. What you talked about earlier catches people off guard sometimes, to think about that kind of thing. And how do you know how much rain has fallen if it's a heavy weather event versus a light weather event? How do you know that?
In terms of like how much rain has accumulated or how much is falling?
Yeah, like this is a really heavy rain, definitely slow down, or this is a light rain, you can keep driving at 55 or something like that.
Yeah, so we're pulling in like, the hourly rainfall rates and things like that. So we can tell if it's heavy or if it's light or if it's moderate, based off of the raw weather data that we're pulling in from those models. And so it's easy again to like set thresholds. Maybe a trucking company only cares when, the rainfall rate is above X, right? And we can alert you for that as well. Yeah,
and that's a good question. Clark brings up telematics, you said, but then video-based safety as well. Like, is there ever a factor in like actually seeing what the driver's seeing? That's probably hard to throw into an algorithm, but I would imagine
it's a great question. And we're actually exploring doing that with some of our telematics providers, because you have companies like Samsara and these other guys who have that capability. So allowing a dispatcher or someone on the back end to see, hey, what are the conditions that are actually happening right now? And what is Weather Optics saying the danger is? I think the more information you can provide, the better. So we're exploring doing some of that as well, and having that as part of our insight portal potentially.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot of potential new insights that could impact the algorithm, just make it better and better, which is pretty exciting. What are all the partners who all have you partnered with so far, to collaborate this data and make sure that everything is as best as possible? And who are the primary, like the best candidates to really benefit from these integrations of this data?
Yep. So we've partnered with a lot of the routing providers. So, you have Trimble and Copilot, you have TomTom, you have Google, you have Here Technologies. And then we've obviously, we've partnered with the telematics guys as well. So we're pulling in data from the telematics companies, and then we're using the routing providers to understand, what route a driver is going to take and how they're going to be impacted. And then we've been doing a lot of strategic channel partnering as well. So Descartes MacroPoint is one of our partners, so you can, get our data through them. We have a partnership with Here as well, where we're available through their marketplace, and same with those telematics providers. So our goal is to make it as easy as possible to access our data. And we know some companies don't want another, login to have to manage with all of their employees. So giving the ability for them to use someone that they're already using and just pull our data through there is really what we're about. And so we're building more and more of these partnerships.
Yeah, so you got integrations obviously with the data providers, that the weather information, things like that. But You're also integrating with TMSs and different systems so that dispatchers, brokers, whoever, they can work inside of their existing platforms as opposed to having to come to the web portal. Although there's got to probably a little bit more a rich feature set in the portal.
Definitely.
Than what they could get just through APIs. Why don't you share with us a little bit more about some of the features and what else you guys are working on?
Yeah, definitely. So I showed you guys the dashboard here, which is, this is our Right Route API, which is, the route planning feature that we have. I can do today, tomorrow, 3 to 7 days from now. I think I actually added a cool one in here. This one, we found snow in May, which is what I was trying to find here, but you can see this route going through Colorado, 4% delay, 7.3 road risk score. And then you'll notice something interesting under our weather conditions. We actually have this extreme weather flag. And this is really important because it's our way of telling our customer that there's a higher than normal likelihood of accidents or road closures due to weather. So even though we're predicting 4%, we're saying, hey, there's a chance that it can be significantly longer because there might be accidents or road closures there. So we have a lot of companies that use us for that flag specifically. That way they know ahead of time, is this road or is this highway going to be closed or shut down?
Yeah. And when you're looking at that 5 to 7 days or 3 to 7 days, whatever's on the platform there, it's anticipating the driver's going to be here by this day and the weather's going to be X, and therefore this is the situation. I mean, so it's taking into account where they believe the driver is going to be at that time. How
Exactly.
is that impacted by, maybe stops the driver makes? I mean, is it constantly kind of updating based upon their geolocation?
Yep. And all of that can be, you can input all of that ahead of time, right? So you can tell us where your vehicle is likely to stop, or, different stop points that are happening along a 3-day trip or something. And again, the more you give us, the more accurate that forecast is going to be of this truck is going to hit this weather at this time. Something also important that our data does is that if there is a slowdown that happens due to weather that we're predicting, you might hit another weather event later on the route or something, or you might miss that event. So we're constantly updating and accounting for slowdowns that you might be seeing along the way, and then recalculating, what weather you're going to hit at a different time along that route. So a lot goes into this product, this Right Route product, that again is available on here and then as an API. So if you just want to call the data, have it integrate with whatever current platform you have, that's an option as well.
Okay, so let me ask this question: how does a freight broker or an asset, based carrier, how do they get access to the data? Is this a subscription model? Is it a by the drink model? Is it something that, how do you sell this?
Yeah. So for the portal here, it's based off of the number of shipments that you're running on a weekly or monthly cadence. So that's how we're gonna price it. It's a subscription based model. And then for the trucking companies, it's based off of the number of vehicles that you have in your fleet.
Okay.
So pretty straightforward. It's a monthly price per vehicle. And then for the API, it's transaction based. So if you're just calling the data, having it work on whatever platform you currently use, we charge you per API call that you make.
Is it so a carrier can have it, a broker can have it, even a shipper could use it? I mean, everybody in the supply chain could potentially use it. What are some of the, I don't know exactly how to ask this question. What are some of the legal ramifications of having this data, maybe not using it, or two parties maybe having the same data, but one actually makes a decision based on it, the other one doesn't? How does that work from a liability standpoint? I'm just thinking about, a trucking company that gets into an accident with black ice, and you've seen those really nasty situations where,
Yep.
30 trucks that just keep slamming into each other, and a car is somewhere in there mangled up, and somebody might die. I mean, those things happen quite a bit, unfortunately. And there's a lot of liability that has to be sorted out. How does having this information either help or hurt in that situation?
Yeah, it's a great tool for validation, right? So like if there is an incident that happens or there's some kind of issue that's being claimed, we have historical data as well, which is great. So like you can go back, I mean, technically you can go back 15 years, but you can go back to the time of an incident, where it happened, and see if weather was actually the primary cause of what took place. And then we also allow you to see, what alert or what information was maybe sent to the driver or to the trucking company at the time to try to help warn them of some kind of incident that's happening. So yeah, we try to make it as easy as possible for you to use the data and to be able to validate things like that have happened.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the in-cab camera technology that has actually helped a lot of carriers get out of lawsuits because they were able to show what actually happened and prove
Yep.
their side of the case. This could have a similar effect in regards to that type of work. How does the platform know if there's a potential for like black ice, which is obviously very hard to spot? And I mean, it's based on the ground temperature. How are you able to capture some of that data to maybe predict, hey, that there's a good chance there's going to be ice on the road?
Yep. So all of that is sort of captured through some of our risk scores. So for example, that road conditions index that I keep talking about, that'll account for any kind of issue like black ice or like visibility on the roadways. So this new tab that I'm showing you here is our impact tab, and it'll show you the live road conditions, anywhere in the US, and you can see how dangerous that is for your driver. So if it's slippery, if it's icy, if there's a visibility issue, or if the roads are wet, all of that is captured into sort of like a simple risk score that we break down. And then you can go up here and see, what does a 4 out of 10 mean? What does that mean for my driver, and how should I respond to that? So that's sort of the beauty of the risk scores here, is that everything that could impact a vehicle is captured in this simple 0 to 10 risk score that we have available.
Yeah. Do you find that drivers sometimes are calling in potentially saying, hey, what's the weather look like on the road coming up? Has that use case happened where drivers reached out to try to find out what's coming down the road, or if there's, maybe a traffic coming up because of an accident that they can't see, stuff like that? How have drivers and dispatchers been working together with some of this data?
Yeah, so it's really easy, like we kind of talked about earlier, to push out information to drivers. And a great point that you brought up is, can we take information back in from drivers? So if a driver is seeing something, or if there's an issue that they're reporting that they might be having, can they send that information back into the dispatcher? And can that also be included in our platform? So in that regard, that's something that we're sort of looking into and seeing if we can have as available. But in the
kind of a
reverse,
Waze approach, like
yeah, exactly,
reporting
exactly.
information as opposed to just
Right. If
receiving
they're
it. Yeah.
seeing something, an issue, or they're having an issue, we want to be able to take that feedback and also have the dispatcher be able to log that and see that and update what might be happening.
I love that. I love it. This is, I can't, I have to say I wasn't nearly as interested in weather until today. Like this has actually piqued my interest on weather. And I'd love to know if people watching the show have any questions or comments. Throw those into the chat so that we can answer some of those throughout the show. So if you got a question for Scott or how it works, make sure you throw that into the comments in that regard. Yeah, man, it's just fascinating to see this and to see what potentially could happen in the future when it comes to this. Because I'll tell you, every time I look on Twitter, especially in the winter, and I see those massive pileup accidents, you just think to yourself, man, there's got to be a way to eliminate this or reduce this as much as possible, because a lot of people end up dying through that situations. Obviously, a lot of property damage, and the cost racks up for lost freight and lost vehicles and all that. There's got to be a way that this can. What's been the reception so far when you talk to carriers, when you talk to brokers, talk to shippers in terms of the data? What's the reception been like?
It's been good. I mean, I think the big thing for us and where we're really valuable is in that weather adjusted ETA. So in addition to the safety aspect that we have, the reception and the feedback has been having the ability to understand when a truck or a shipment is going to be delayed is really helpful in planning. So even avoiding, right, because the goal should be avoiding those situations of being in bad weather altogether when you can. So it's great to have real-time alerts like we do and have the risk score and alert a driver that there's an issue. But if a couple days ahead of time, you can see that there's going to be an issue or a delay, and you can send your driver down a different route or lane, that's really our goal, to be able to allow companies to be proactive and choosing how they travel.
Yeah, you would think that it would be well received, but at the same time, I think that sometimes there's probably people out there who may want to stay ignorant so that they could push the limit and kind of, claim I didn't know type of a thing, which unfortunately happens because of time constraints or expectations or those types of things. But I hope that the industry can use this data to move to more of, I'd say, a realistic expectation of what, of what a truck can do or should do when they're out there on the road.
Totally. I think people don't realize, right, that like a quarter of all trucking accidents are due to weather. So there is a substantial percentage of time that when there's an incident that could be super costly to you or super dangerous and life-threatening to your driver, a lot of that is due to weather. And you have trucking companies that, might have the Weather Channel on in the background or might be doing some other method of alerting for a weather incident. And so these tools are really important in helping to solve that and being able to have something easy that you can integrate and show to your drivers.
Yeah. I think that there's just so much power in having this data to make those decisions. And one other question I had is on the road index that you have. Does that take into account also the cleaning up of the road? So I know, like in Wyoming, for example, they get these massive snow drifts in the winter, and then they shut down the highway. Or sometimes in places where maybe it's not quite as bad, but there's a lot of snow, they're cleaning off the highways, with snow plows and things like that. Does it take that into account? Is it calculating in like the flow of traffic to figure out the road conditions, or what all goes into that road condition index?
Yeah, so we have some of that as well. By partnering with those routing providers, we're able to understand when there are road closures or incidents that took place. And so our routing software will recognize that and might not route you, through that area. The other thing that we have with our road index is that we basically have a decay kind of function, right? Where a certain number of hours after a snow event has hit or road risk was really high, we're able to predict how long it'll take for a cleanup crew to get to those roads or how long it'll take for the snow to melt away or conditions to improve. So you won't just see like a spike to a 7 and then drop right down to a 0, right? When like the snowstorm ends, we try to simulate as best as we can how cleanup crews are going to basically handle those kind of events.
Yeah. And there's certain parts of the country where they don't have any of the equipment. You know, like what happened in Texas a couple years ago with the freeze, the ice and the snowstorms that they had down there. They didn't have any equipment for that. They just had to literally wait for it to thaw out, as
Yep.
opposed to here in St. Louis, we get a lot of snow or ice, and within 24 hours, it's pretty pretty cleaned up.
That's
Clark says
actually
not to mention. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that's a great point that you bring up. Is something else our data takes into account, location-based differences. So an inch of snow in Chicago versus Atlanta, right? Two totally different things. Chicago's fine in an inch of snow. Atlanta could be shut down. So that's a super crucial piece that we account for. But I just thought that was a great point that you brought up.
Yeah, no one knows how to drive in those areas, in bad weather. I remember
I've never seen snow before. Yeah.
I remember a funny story when we moved to Portland, Oregon, back in 2010. It was like late October, early November, something like that. And the newscaster, the meteorologist, came on the air and said, "Folks, there's about a 40% chance we're gonna get some ice tomorrow, so you may just want to stay home." And I'm like, "Stay home? Like, what are you talking about?" But nobody there knew how to drive in the ice. So the next day, like, I went out to go door to door, and there was hardly anybody at work because there was a 40% chance of ice. I don't even think it iced that much, but there was just this chance. They're like, "Just stay home, people." It's like, what? It's such a odd,
I mean, it makes sense.
thing.
There's just there's different places that handle weather differently. And I mean, LA, for example, right? Like when it rains, it's known for the traffic is insane.
Right.
And that's something that's built into how they, they're not accustomed to those kind of weather conditions.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Josh says, can you explain what else goes into the ratings, like non-weather information and risk of accidents?
Yep. So something that we talked about a little bit earlier, but there's a lot of that non-weather data that goes into the road index and the other indices. So geospatial variables, like really specific tree height and density, accident reports, which I think is what Josh was also
tree height and density, because
that's
maybe
more
the wind could blow them over.
Yeah, exactly.
Power outages. Okay.
So there's a lot of different things that's non-weather related that make us different from another different weather company or typical weather companies out there. But all of that is factored into those risk scores that we have, and that's what makes them, I think, so powerful and so easy to use.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. There's some things that you don't really account for. For example, an ice storm in December usually doesn't have nearly the impact on trees as it does in October or maybe March or April, because the leaves are on there. The trees are heavier then because more ice, and you get these branches breaking and all kinds of things that happen. So it's a totally different event. The exact same event is totally different depending on the season.
Definitely. And that's the risk you run if you're just using like raw weather data. So if you're using whether it be the National Weather Service or someone else and just getting like the raw information, you don't know the time of year and what kind of impact that might have. So I think that's a great point.
Okay, non-platform question. Did you ever think about being a meteorologist? Did that ever sound
I did.
like Yeah?
I totally did. Yeah. Growing up.
Chose not to go that route?
I chose not to go that route. When I tell you I was young when I started getting interested in the weather, I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old. So there's like videos of me at like 4 and 5 pretending to be
reporting the weather.
Yeah, exactly. But I grew up and I loved entrepreneurship. I loved business. And so, I wanted to create something from that passion of weather and sort of put 2 and 2 together.
All right. So 2 questions. What's the easiest place to be a meteorologist? What do you think is the most cush meteorologist job?
Somewhere in Arizona, maybe. Arizona, Southern California.
The temperature does change a little bit there. Southern California, San Diego.
Yeah. Southern California, like a San Diego, is pretty much, although this past winter there was a ton of rain, a ton of storms. So I shouldn't say that. They had more weather than they've ever had before. It was really crazy out west this winter, but somewhere out there is probably a good bet.
I think my answer is Hawaii, because I'm pretty sure it's the same literally every day.
Hawaii's
all
really
year long.
interesting. Yeah, Hawaii is interesting because they have such crazy elevation, right? So like you can have snow in the mountains of Hawaii, and then the coast could be sunny and clear. So Hawaii would be a very cool place to be a meteorologist.
But it's got to be pretty much the same. I mean, if you're talking about Honolulu, I imagine the temperatures and the rain that comes through about the same every day. Like why do they even have meteorologists in Hawaii? That's my question.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a meteorologist. I mean, I guess the one time I've been there, I wasn't watching.
Right. I bet they got him.
So
I bet they got him. But that's got to be the easiest job, is a place like that. Or I remember when I was in Portland, you'd see the 10-day forecast, and it was literally the same. Like in the winter, it's like it's going to be a light rain and 50 degrees. Like,
right.
It was just the same every time. Where's the hardest place you think to be a meteorologist? What's the toughest job?
The plains. I mean, Midwest, upper Midwest. You have you have just the craziest temperature swings. You have it snowing one day, there's severe thunderstorms the next day.
Wild.
Even places like Colorado and out west there, those are hard places. I'm going to pick Denver, maybe. That's a tough place, believe it or not, I think, to be a meteorologist.
I could see that. Here in St. Louis, we have days where, it'll be 80 degrees, 82 degrees, like in March. And then a couple days later, the high is 40.
Yeah.
Like, man, like this is just brutal. Like, it's terrible on your allergies. But yeah, we get some pretty crazy events from time to time. That's probably a difficult spot. There's got to be harder spots around the world, but this is a pretty tough one.
Oh, there probably are. There definitely are. But there are definitely areas in the U.S. that are really hard. And tornadoes are tornadoes are really obviously big in the U.S., right? More than a lot of other places. And so anytime you're predicting severe weather, it is really difficult. And a lot of credit to, they have meteorologists at the National Weather Service who are severe weather experts, and they're able to have a pretty good idea of what areas are at risk. So it's a very hard job as a meteorologist.
Yeah, harder than than people think, especially in some of those tough spots. That's for sure.
Right.
Do you have a favorite weather-related movie? I've got one.
You know what? Watched. I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but I watched Twister for the first time this past weekend. For the first time, I had a friend who was like, "You've never seen Twister?" And I was like, "No, I've never seen Twister." And it was great, phenomenal movie.
Is it pretty accurate as somebody who has chased tornadoes? Are there people out there that are doing like?
I am not as good. They get a lot more credit than I do. That's not the type of storm chasing.
If there are people with those setups, I mean, it's pretty wild that people.
Yeah, it was really impressive.
Campers and whatnot.
Yeah, they definitely had some things right. There were definitely some things that weren't as right
for movies, right?
right. But I actually heard they're doing a Twister 2. They're doing a new take on Twister next summer. So
interesting. We'll have to have all new actors, I think, because a lot of them aren't around anymore, unfortunately.
I think so. I think it's almost all new actors.
But yeah, I was going to say Twister is probably my favorite weather movie. I can't even think of a ton of weather movies that are out there.
They have some help from the one I always answer is, I don't know if you saw The Day After Tomorrow.
Oh, I didn't see that, but is that the flood? Is that right?
Yeah, the New York City flood.
Okay.
Great movie.
I never saw that one. Maybe I'll have to watch that one this weekend.
Great movie. Yeah. It's a little cheesy, but it's good. Yeah.
Some editorial liberties I'm sure they take to
exactly.
make it actually work, but that could be good. I guess the other one, another one that I liked is San Andreas. Do you see that one?
I never saw that one. No.
That's a pretty cool one. I mean, it's more of a geological event, but there's some weather involved in that as well. It's pretty interesting. So
interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's probably more geological.
Add that to my list. Yeah.
It's a pretty good movie. The Rock's in it, but yeah, probably more geological than weather. But there's a little bit of weather in there. But anyway,
geology.
All right, well, listen,
crossover.
We got to bring this thing in for a landing here. So, a couple of things I want to ask you is what's in the development pipeline? What are you guys working on or excited about? Anything new that's on the horizon we should keep our eyes open for?
Yeah, something we're going to deploy in a couple of months here is a new wildfire index, which I think will be really helpful and really interesting.
We didn't even talk about wildfires.
Yeah. So predicting not only like the chances that a wildfire is going to develop, but also where it's going to move, which is so crucial. So figuring out exactly what towns or communities or cities are going to be at risk of wildfire movement or development. And so that'll be really
is that based on historic wind direction, things like that?
We trained it on a ton of historical wildfire data, and then we're accounting for, real-time weather and topography data as well. But we're really excited about it. We've seen some really good results from what we've tested so far. And I think it's going to be a huge help for logistics and then also outside of supply chain as well.
So I was going to say there's a lot of uses here beyond supply chain. It sounds like that could be really useful. I'm thinking just for even like homeowners in California or other places for that, for example, where wildfires are devastating, and having as much time as they can to, especially when one starts, to know where it's going to head to, it can be really, really valuable.
Definitely. A lot of industries that weather data is important for.
Are the weather services not doing that kind of stuff right now? Like, do they have this type of wildfire kind of prediction?
They do, and they're really great at being able to create forecasts and discussions for cities and states and even businesses sometimes. But it's really about providing data that is actionable and translated into something that businesses can also use, and also making it easy for those businesses to access. So the thing that, the NWS, as great as they are, and we obviously use, some of their data, it's about making it easy for businesses to access and integrate the data. And that's where we come in.
NWS sounds like a 90s hip hop band. Just roll off your tongue like, it's like no big deal. Kind of happens with that. So, so Ian says nice roadmap with wildfire data. Yeah, that's fascinating, dude.
We're excited.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, how can somebody best get a hold of you or start utilizing Weather Optics?
Yeah, definitely. Feel free to visit our website. It's weatheroptics.co. That's .co, not .com. And then they can get in contact with me directly, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat always about the weather.
Yeah. And hopefully we got it right there on the banner for you, Weather Optics.
Yeah, there you go.
So make sure you check that out, everybody. Reach out to Scott on LinkedIn, send him a DM, connect with him. What's the next event you guys are going to be going to? You going to any trade shows coming up?
We're trying to get some planned. I think we're going to get a couple of trucking shows maybe later in the year, but nothing solidified yet. We love the shows. TIA was great. Yeah,
TIA is really good, and I can imagine that TIA would be a great show for you. Maybe TCA, some of the big trucking shows. Did you go to Matt's?
No, we were not there.
Oh, you should hit that one.
I know. We got to increase the number of events that we're going to now.
Matt's will be really fascinating. A lot of owner operators go there, but obviously they care about their trucks. They own their trucks there, so there's a lot of interest in them in staying safe, and could be a good show to build brand awareness and some things like that. Well, definitely. I'm excited, Scott. Thanks so much for being on the show today. It's great just to hear what you guys are up to. And again, I think this is one of those things, one of those data sets that's really going to move the needle and move us more towards a much safer industry. And I just hope that carriers out there and dispatchers and brokers will understand the impact of weather and make responsible decisions to keep drivers safe, to keep others on the road safe, to make sure shipments arrive, safely, as opposed to what we're seeing, out there, especially in the winter with all those accidents. So I love what you're doing, man. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Trey.
Yep. We'll talk to you soon, buddy. And listen, hey, if you have not checked out Weather Optics, you got to do it. Go to weatheroptics.co, schedule a demo, find out what's there, let your dispatchers know about it, let your CEOs know about what's out there. There's great data that's going to help you guys out in terms of keeping people safe out on the road. We appreciate you guys watching the show today. Clark, as always, thanks for watching. Appreciate having you on the show as well. Listen, next month, we've got Open Dock on the show. We're going to be talking about scheduling shipments and all the things that go on with that and the technology that's out there. So make sure that you come back for that show. That's going to be in June. And we've got a couple of events coming up as well. So beyond that, we got TMSA. This is Transportation Marketing and Sales Association's conference. Their annual conference called Elevate is June 11th through 13th in Savannah, Georgia. We're going to be there with the Savannah Bananas. If you're in sales and marketing, you got to come. I'm going to be emceeing. Can't wait for that show. Go to events.tmsatoday.org to sign up for that, and we will see you in Savannah. And also a new show that I wanted to tell you about is the Broker Carrier Summit. So this is coming on October 12th through 13 down in Tampa, Florida. And this is the opportunity for brokers and carriers to get into the same room and talk about the issues that are really impacting the industry. And so I want to make sure that you guys know about that and that you show up for that, because it's going to be an awesome conference. You can find out more through the CVent link that we're going to put into the show. So you'll have that and you can sign up for that. It's going to be a great event down in Tampa, Florida. All right, well, listen, we're excited to have these shows and to provide this technology and show you guys what's going on out there, what's really moving the needle, highlight the latest in logistics tech. We got other shows as well. So tomorrow, make sure you come back for Standing Out at 2 p.m. Central with a different Beth Carroll. We're going to talk about sales compensation in freight brokerages. And of course, we got work Sunday afternoon. So a lot of great things coming up. But until then, thanks so much for being a part of today. The Edge, showcasing the latest in logistics technology, powered by Beta Consulting Group. We will see you guys next time. See ya.
On track, now we gon' way up. W's as easy as a layup. Working late, stay up. Counting all the way up. Counting blessings, yeah, you know we pray up. Way up, pray up. On track, now we gon' way up. Now we gon' way up. Now we going. On track, now we gon' way up. Now we gon' way up. Now we going. Keep the same energy. Work on being